In the heart of Manhattan, nestled among the towering skyscrapers, stood Pinnacle Trust Bank. Its polished marble facade reflected the bustling life of the city, where deals worth millions were struck daily. On a typical Tuesday morning, the air was filled with the hum of conversations, the rhythmic tapping of keyboards, and the low whir of the air conditioning. The atmosphere was one of ambition and success. Amidst this backdrop, an elderly man named Samuel Collins entered the bank. At 91 years old, he walked with a slight stoop, his weathered hands trembling as he adjusted the brim of his well-worn hat. Samuel's face bore deep lines that told stories of a life well lived, yet his eyes sparkled with a sharpness that belied his age. He moved slowly, deliberately, but there was an undeniable dignity in his demeanor, a sense of a man who had seen more than most could fathom. As he approached the reception desk, few clients took notice of him. Most were sharply dressed executives engrossed in their own pursuits, clearly not expecting someone like Samuel in a high-end investment bank. "Excuse me," Samuel said, his voice raspy yet clear. "I would like to speak with someone about an investment opportunity." The receptionist, a young woman named Rachel, looked up from her computer, momentarily taken aback by his presence. She managed a polite smile, one reserved for those who seemed out of place. "I'm sorry, sir, but this is a business-focused bank. We typically don't handle individual investments for personal clients. Could you be more specific?" Samuel adjusted his glasses, a hint of annoyance flickering in his eyes. "I know exactly what I want, young lady. This is urgent." Rachel, slightly annoyed by the disruption, glanced at her watch, her mind already on her busy schedule. "Right," she replied quickly, waving him toward a row of empty chairs. "Please take a seat over there. I'll see if someone can assist you." Samuel hesitated, his gaze flickering between Rachel and the imposing marble counter. With a resigned sigh, he took a seat, his posture straight despite his age. Time passed slowly, and Rachel returned to her work, casting occasional glances his way. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours, and no one came to assist him. Samuel's patience was evident. He sat quietly, hands folded, waiting to be heard. Meanwhile, Rachel found herself distracted, her mind wandering. What could an elderly man possibly want in a place like this? She assumed he might be one of those hopeful dreamers who had heard of the bank's success, believing he could somehow get in on an insider deal. Yet, appearances could be deceiving. A few moments later, a tall figure entered the reception area, Mark Dawson, the head of corporate investments at Pinnacle Trust. Known for his sharp business acumen and striking presence, he was in his late 30s and had rapidly risen through the bank's ranks. "Anything I can do for you, Rachel?" he asked, his voice crisp and confident. "I was just about to send Mr. Collins over to you," Rachel replied, her tone neutral. "He's waiting to discuss an investment opportunity." "Mr. Collins? Who's that?" Mark asked, raising an eyebrow. "The elderly man sitting over there," Rachel gestured toward Samuel, who remained seated in silence. Mark frowned slightly. "Right. I'll take care of it." As Mark walked over, Rachel felt a sense of unease wash over her. There was something about Samuel that stirred a feeling she couldn't quite articulate. Mark approached Samuel with his usual air of authority. "Good morning, sir," he said smoothly. "I understand you're here to discuss an investment opportunity." Samuel stood slowly, scrutinizing Mark with an intensity that made the younger man slightly uncomfortable. "Yes, I am. I've heard this is a place where important matters are taken seriously." Mark smiled, though it was tinged with skepticism. "Of course. We handle the most prestigious clients. What sort of investment are you looking for?" "I'm not interested in the usual investments," Samuel replied cryptically. "I want something different, something that matters." Mark's smile faltered for a brief moment. "I'm sure we can find something suitable for you. Please follow me to my office, and we'll discuss the details." Samuel followed Mark through the sleek corridors of the bank, passing glass walls showcasing portfolios and projections of wealth. Mark led him into a large office with a panoramic view of the city skyline. "Please, make yourself comfortable," Mark said, motioning for Samuel to sit. "Now, tell me about your investment ideas." Samuel settled into the chair, his gaze unwavering. "I have a proposal," he said quietly, "one that might surprise you." Mark leaned forward, intrigued despite himself. "I'm listening." "I hold substantial wealth," Samuel continued, "not in cash, but in something far more valuable. I'm interested in securing a place for it in your bank." Mark raised an eyebrow. "Wealth that's not in cash?" Samuel nodded. "That's right. It's not your typical currency, but it holds enormous value and can make you a very wealthy man if you play your cards right." Mark's curiosity piqued. "Go on." Samuel leaned in slightly, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "I want you to invest in a business that will change the world, a business that no one knows about yet but that will grow into something enormous. I have the blueprint, but I need someone with your influence, someone with the resources of this bank, to help me make it real." Mark's mind raced. This was not the pitch he had anticipated. "All right," he said, trying to maintain professionalism. "But I need more details. If you want us to invest, I'll need to see proof." Samuel smiled faintly, his eyes gleaming. "All in good time. For now, I have a simple request. I want you to take me seriously." Mark chuckled, masking his growing unease. "I assure you, I take all my clients seriously, but I need something concrete." Samuel stood slowly, his movements deliberate. "Then let me show you something." He reached into his coat pocket and produced a small, weathered envelope. Handing it to Mark, he watched as the younger man opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper bearing a name, Patrick Collins. Mark's heart raced as he recognized the name. The emblem of Pinnacle Trust Bank's largest private investor was boldly displayed below it. This was a key that could change everything. Mark tightened his grip on the envelope, his pulse quickening. He glanced up at Samuel, who awaited his response with quiet expectation. "Mr. Collins," Mark began, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "I'm afraid I don't quite understand what you're asking of me." Samuel's expression remained calm. "I'm asking you to trust me. The world is changing, and this bank has a chance to be part of something that will redefine the future." Mark leaned back in his chair, exhaling sharply. He felt a knot form in his stomach. Trust was a luxury he couldn't afford, especially not with someone who seemed to appear from nowhere with little more than cryptic words and a nebulous proposal. "I'm afraid we'll have to decline," Mark said firmly. "This doesn't align with our current strategy. The risk is too great, and your proposal is vague at best." Samuel's eyes darkened, the intensity within them shifting to something sharper. "You don't understand," he said softly. "This is bigger than anything you've ever dealt with." Mark stood up, impatience creeping into his voice. "I think we're done here. I'd appreciate it if you'd leave." Samuel nodded once, as if he had expected this. He turned and walked toward the door, his steps measured. Mark watched him go, an unsettling feeling growing in his chest. As the door clicked shut, Mark sank back into his chair, grappling with the weight of the encounter. He had brushed aside countless proposals in his career, but this one felt different, darker perhaps. Yet he quickly shook off the thought, business was business. The next morning, Rachel entered Mark's office with a look of urgency. "You need to see this," she said, placing a thick folder on his desk. Mark raised an eyebrow, flipping through the pages. His eyes widened as he read the documents, confidential files detailing the history of Patrick Collins, the bank's largest investor. Unbeknownst to him, Samuel was not just any elderly man, he was a key architect of Pinnacle Trust Bank. As the realization dawned, Mark felt a cold sweat trickle down his spine. He had dismissed Samuel Collins, a foundational figure in the bank's history, and now he understood the magnitude of his mistake. "We need to find him," Mark said urgently, panic rising in his chest. "We've made a huge mistake." But it was too late. Samuel Collins had vanished, and somewhere his son, Patrick, was waiting, watching, and preparing for his next move. Mark's decision had set off a cascade of events that could not be undone, and as the day wore on, he felt the weight of his blunder settle heavily on his shoulders. The following days were a whirlwind. Mark learned of Patrick's influence in both financial and political circles, and the implications of their actions began to unfold. With every passing hour, the urgency to rectify the situation grew. Finally, Mark managed to get in touch with Patrick, who expressed his deep disappointment at how his father had been treated. "You must publicly acknowledge your error," Patrick insisted. Failure to do so could have catastrophic consequences for Pinnacle Trust Bank. Realizing he had no other choice, Mark prepared for the confrontation, determined to make amends. Yet, deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was now entangled in a much larger game than he had ever anticipated. As tensions mounted, Mark gathered the board and presented the evidence against Martin Knight, revealing the intricate web of manipulation that had ensnared them all. The atmosphere in the room was thick with realization as they took swift action to remove Martin from power. In the end, with the support of the Whitaker family, Mark reclaimed control of Pinnacle Trust Bank. As he stood in his office, looking out over the city, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The experience had taught him invaluable lessons about trust, the importance of recognizing true allies, and the necessity of acting with integrity. Together with Samuel and Patrick, Mark began a new chapter for the bank, one founded on transparency and collaboration, ensuring that the shadows of deceit would never threaten them again. The future was bright, and for the first time in a long while, Mark felt he had finally found his place.